Welcome to Auntie K's Tarot, your favorite radical queer indigenous auntie, bringing you tarot every day. Hello everyone and welcome to Auntie K's Tarot. So today's video is called Wait, is that actually gatekeeping? And it was contemplation about a cultural situation I was helping to solve that led me to question what is and isn't gatekeeping. All right, so as tarot readers, when we think what is an example of gatekeeping, many of us will think of the trope that you have to be gifted your first deck. And we will point to that as a form of gatekeeping. So before I continue, let me be clear. I do not believe that people need to be gifted their first deck. But after some contemplation, I also don't believe it's gatekeeping. See, first we need to ask ourselves, what is gatekeeping? The activity of trying to control who gets particular resources, power, or opportunities and who does not. So gatekeeping includes power dynamics. And one has to question when you are told you have to be gifted your first deck, is there an actual power dynamic preventing you from the accessibility of laying down your money and purchasing a deck if you have the money to do it, and then a book to help you learn and read it? Is that, are you actually prevented from doing it, or do you just maybe feel insecure about it? Is that actually gatekeeping? Who is actually disadvantaged by this idea? Money? Is money and privilege truly disadvantaged? Is this idea actually only attacking those with the money and privilege to access tarot by any means they wish, and trying to give advantage to those who maybe didn't have access to go buy the newest deck, the newest book, the newest course, accreditation, etc., etc. So within my own community, my indigenous community here to Turtle Island, items like the ones behind me are items that traditionally you're not allowed to purchase. They should be gifted, gathered, or gestated, created. So these are the ways in which these things should be obtained. And when it comes to our teachings, you're supposed to be able to say who that teaching came from. And I can say that my drum teachings came from Running Wolf Brayley, that they also came from Joey Twins. They came from Matilda Snake, Vern Harper, and Pauline Shirt, as well as Harold Perry. And and also one of Harold's helper, so a few generations down, Mitchell Sewell, who is a white duck also. So that's where my drum teachings came from. And I can say that. And I can say these things about different songs I've learned and different teachings I've obtained. And so when I repeat a piece of knowledge and I can say who taught me that piece of knowledge, validates what I am saying, kind of like footnotes in a book, right? And it also validates where my spiritual items came from in the same manner. And why is that validation necessary? And I actually think most of this validation is brand new. It's a validation that came about in modern times, in the 20th century, because before colonization, everybody knew where your teaching came from. They were there when you got it. They all knew, like the whole community knew. And so this is a more modern requirement and a modern way to accredit how we know our knowledge. But when did it become really necessary? Well, I think it probably became really necessary. Indigenous people have gone through fads with their colonizers wanting to beat them. And at one point, and so that brings me back to this idea of who and what and when is it gatekeeping, and you must be gifted a tarot deck. And is that gatekeeping? It's not gatekeeping. I suspect the idea of being gifted a tarot deck came as probably as this deck was being created, and possibly before that, but probably a bit before that. And it probably was a way of countering the gatekeeping of ceremonial magic, the gatekeeping of the highfalutin readers, and a way for disadvantaged communities who were traditionally fortune tellers to give themselves a different accreditation. If it was gifted to you, it was passed down, right? And so your knowledge and your psychic ability was passed down. And that could lift you up over top of this more highfalutin accreditation. And that probably then grew a bit when the rise of like getting accredited. I think back to astrology. Accreditation made it really difficult for a lot of disadvantaged astrologers to remain professional. Not become professional, remain professional as accreditation became a thing. And I suspect the idea of having a tarot deck passed down, one, as someone who had my first tarot decks gifted to me, I don't believe it's necessary. I don't even have my first tarot decks because I didn't like them. I didn't connect with them. I didn't like them. And they didn't work for me, which is totally a first world 20th century problem. Oh, I didn't like my tarot decks. Oh no, I didn't like my tarot decks. And eventually I got and made decks I didn't like. Totally a modern problem in the first world, totally. But even being gifted my first deck didn't prevent me from going out and buying decks. And I didn't actually know that was something that people thought was necessary. But so it doesn't make a difference. But what it does do is it gives you a teacher. It gives you someone who's responsible to teaching you that art. It passes down the reading and not just the deck. It's a way to access that knowledge if you can't buy the expensive book, don't know about the book, whatever. So it passes it down. And it's a really valid way of passing it down. And I know this because as someone who works on the hotlines, all kinds of profiles say things like 7th generation, 4th generation tarot reader. I believe some of them, I think some of them are just saying it because it sounds more impressive, right? It sounds more impressive. And it is a way of sounding impressive in the face of a celebrity tarot reader and, accreditation and all of this. It's a way of saying, my knowledge is also valid. And it did not prevent rich people and people with money and middle class folks who, if you're on the bottom, seem rich. They just do. You do. And that never stopped any of them. It just irritated them that somebody else had found a way to make knowledge credible that wasn't the same as what made them credible, and that it made them feel insecure. So I think it's important that this realization came to me. I think it's important to discuss, even if I don't agree with that, does that mean I should call it gatekeeping? And is it actually gatekeeping? Or is it just another way of saying, this is the way my knowledge was obtained, and the way that my knowledge has become credible, and the way that my practice is credible? And if there's no power dynamic involved, power, not your hurt feelings, actual power, then it's not actually gatekeeping. And it's important for us to discuss, why are we delegitimizing a practice just because it makes us feel insecure? And I think that is important to unpack before we call uncomfortable ideas gatekeeping. Just because it's not gatekeeping doesn't mean I have to believe it's necessary. But maybe it's important that I see the benefits it offers the person and the people who chose that path, that it's different than another path. And culture and practice, what they have in common is that they're living. And so they change and evolve. And sometimes it's to protect those of us who are most vulnerable. It only becomes gatekeeping when it protects somebody who has money. As long as it is protecting those who obtain knowledge and access in means that avoid money, it isn't gatekeeping. If it's avoiding money, it is about the bottom, even if it hasn't included you. The things we do to protect ourselves from power will be taken by power and twisted against us one way or another. And I suspect that by turning the idea that being gifted a deck is a gatekeeping mentality, how do I phrase that so it comes out clean? I think us calling gifting a deck a gatekeeper mentality is actually the whole opposite, where it is the powerful twisting it back on itself and attacking the those without the power. And I don't think it needs to change our views on whether or not you think you should be gifted a deck or purchase one. I purchased my decks because I didn't like my first gifted decks. But it doesn't mean that we should ever shit on the free way to go about it. Because if we're shitting on the free method of obtaining access, we are actually the one gatekeeping. Okay, I think I got that conclusion all together finally in a sentence that made sense. And I would really enjoy to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Or, of course, you can also VR. And because I always forget to say it, like, comment, and subscribe.